Life is a brutal, Darwinian, survival of the fittest experience. You have to work for everything, and nothing is free. This is just a biological law of nature that we see everywhere, even in the animal kingdom. It is hunt or die, kill or be killed. Everything is a brutal, deadly competition, even in nature. This is a hallmark capitalist argument that's often used to justify the horrible dogshit wages and exploitation we face in the workplace as young people today. Hey, there's nothing wrong with the system. Having to work and fight over resources is just a natural law of the universe. Just look at how a lion has to hunt his prey in order to eat and survive. Nothing is free, right? Not exactly. Because did you know that clownfish are actually born with free housing as a God-given right that they didn't have to work for? That's right, clownfish live in sea anemone, a deadly marine invertebrate with stinging tentacles that are lethal to just about every other fish. Clownfish, however, are born with a special mucus coating that makes them immune to their stings, and as a result, they get to live in sea anemone free of charge from the time they're born. The stinging tentacles of a sea anemone deter most predators from trying to eat the clownfish, and as a result, clownfish are essentially born in the animal kingdom equivalent of an ice house in a gated community with max level security. All for free. They don't have to work for it, they don't have to pay rent, and they certainly didn't have to build the sea anemone. This is just one of many examples throughout the animal kingdom that, as you'll soon see, totally debunk this commonly regurgitated capitalist myth that's been used and reused way too many times to justify human exploitation and suffering.
A lot of the things we take as normal are actually fucking insane, okay? The phrase "to earn a living" is batshit crazy. Do you understand how crazy that is? To earn a living implies that if you don't earn, you fucking die. You have to earn the right to live.
Before we delve into our fascinating journey through the animal kingdom, it's worth it to take a quick moment to give you guys a bit of context on the inspiration for this video. This is a TikTok clip that went absolutely viral not too long ago. It echoes a sentiment that a lot of us Gen Z and millennials have thought for a long time, but could never quite say it out loud. And it's something I couldn't agree with more. I included this clip in a previous video of mine, which blew up and got way more views and comments than I expected. A common rebuttal I kept seeing over and over was that, hey, the phrase "earn a living" actually isn't crazy. It is not a God-given right. The entire animal kingdom is proof this isn't the case. This argument kept popping up over and over and over. And this isn't the first time we've heard this. I'm sure you've all heard this argument in your real life at some point too. Given that it is such a common but wrong argument, as you'll soon see, it is worth it to take the time to debunk it once and for all. We actually have more than enough food, land, and resources to feed everyone today. The reason we choose not to is purely because we've been brainwashed through centuries of consumerist propaganda. But the road to a better world starts by understanding and eventually detaching ourselves from this brainwashing. Let's begin our journey through the animal kingdom. Now, right off the bat, the biggest reason invoking the animal kingdom argument to defend forcing humans to work is a really bad argument is the sheer heavy-handed, massively oversimplified nature of it. The animal kingdom literally has millions upon millions of different species. The idea that they all fall under the same umbrella and are all governed by the exact same rules is just way too simple-minded. For example, bees, ants, and termites do indeed work constantly and are the perfect low-hanging fruit to use if you want to defend the capitalist ethos. But on the other hand, crocodiles, frogs, and reptiles can go weeks, months, and even years just chilling without having to hunt for or eat food. This is just one of many examples you'll soon see in which nature is just as anti-capitalist as it is capitalist. So, as we already discussed in the beginning of this video, our good friend Nemo is nature's proof that the phrase "earn a living" is indeed insane. They're essentially born with free accommodation and security in the form of the sea anemone as a birthright. So you might be wondering at this point, what's in it for the sea anemone? And this is a good question. For one, as it turns out, clownfish crap is actually really good as fertilizer for the sea anemone. Now, this leads me to a very important point, which is that it's worth it to take a moment to clearly define what counts as work. Terms have to be clearly defined in order to have a productive conversation. I learned this the hard way in my previous video on the subject, when they pointed out that carnivore predators such as lions and hyenas have to work tirelessly to hunt for prey. It is quite easy to refute this by simply pointing out that herbivores such as capybaras live fairly chill lives where they're born around plenty of lush vegetation and pretty much get to eat for free their whole lives. It's at this point when they'll literally change the meaning of the word work and be like, but a capybara still has to chew and digest the grass, therefore they still work. The problem with this logic is that if any form of energy expenditure now counts as work, then walking to the welfare office to apply for food stamps, grocery shopping, cooking, chewing, and eating now counts as work too. And so it's still not a valid defense for why we should be forced to work a 9 to 5 and earn money. So I think the best and most fair way to define work in the context of this conversation would be to call it having to go out of your way to do something you normally wouldn't do in order to survive. Now, if you want to define it as anything requiring energy expenditure, that's fine too. But just know that under that definition, even the laziest people who purely live off welfare still work when they walk to the fridge to get food. So that's why it is a pretty stupid way to define it. I just have to quickly clarify that before a bunch of corporate shills pop up in the comments going like, but by excreting waste, clownfish still provide value to the sea anemone, therefore they still work. So if that's your logic, human waste does the same thing after you flush it down the toilet. It eventually gets used as fertilizer for agriculture after sewage treatment. So bingo. You're already providing value to society every time you use the bathroom. Therefore, you shouldn't have to work a 9 to 5 anymore, right? Yeah, somehow I feel like the defenders of this broken system are really going to backtrack on their own logic now. Okay, so clownfish crap aside though, the only other tasks a clownfish really has to do for the sea anemone is keeping the sea anemone clean by eating food scraps, parasites, and other debris. This does provide value to the sea anemone, but it does so by giving even more free stuff to the clownfish. The clownfish now gets free rent and free food. So the idea that nothing is free, even in nature, is just objectively false. We can see that both sides here get free benefits from each other without having to work, without having to go out of their way to do something they normally wouldn't do. The only thing a clownfish does that you could potentially argue is work is the fact that it occasionally has to chase away butterfly fish from eating the sea anemone. But this is a far cry from having to work a 9 to 5, 8-hour shift every day of your life. The work it has to do is extremely minimal compared to the jobs we have to do. But just in case some corporate shills continue to pop up and be like, but technically they still have to work, our next animal is an even better rebuttal of capitalism. Hey guys, you may have noticed we're extremely close to 10,000 subscribers now. So if you're new here and enjoying this content, definitely consider subscribing and helping us get closer to this magic number. Would really mean a lot. Thanks a bunch. You guys are awesome. Part 2, the remora fish. We don't even have to leave the ocean to find our next example in nature, which proves we shouldn't have to earn the right to live. The remora fish has quite literally mastered the art of unemployment. Its ability to survive without having to work even puts Gen Z to shame. This neat little fish has evolved a suction cup on top of its head, which allows it to hitch a free ride onto larger marine animals like sharks. This is literally nature's version of a free Uber, and this free Uber even provides free food on top of free transportation. As the shark roams the ocean hunting for prey, the remora fish simply sits there eating the leftover scraps from the shark's meal. That's it. They don't have to fight, they don't have to work, they don't have to chase any prey themselves, they don't have to deal with any sort of competition. They also snack on parasites and dead skin from the sharks, which is why the sharks find them useful and don't just eat them. Technically, this is a mutually beneficial arrangement, but in terms of labor, it is very, very one-sided. Again, the remora fish needs to eat anyways, so it doesn't have to go out of its way to do something it normally wouldn't do to get its free food and transportation. This is why it's important to separate labor from any form of contribution in the context of this conversation, because as we discussed earlier, technically anytime you use the bathroom, you are contributing to society. But I highly doubt capitalists are going to consider that as work. Part 3, the white stork. You know how Gen Z is constantly being shamed for not being able to move out of their parents' house because these delusional boomers literally don't understand how rent prices work? You've probably even heard them say, the bird has to leave the nest at some point, right? This is a cute expression that sounds all nice and inspirational, but is actually ironically directly the opposite of how it actually works in nature with actual birds. The white stork is a bird that's famous for something called generational nesting. They've even been known to reuse the same nest for decades, sometimes even up to 100 years, passing it down as an inherited birthright for many generations. These nests can become absolutely enormous, sometimes up to 2 meters. And they're proof that even in nature, this idea of kicking your kids out at 18 and expecting them to make it in this god-awful economy is just totally ridiculous. They typically build these nests in very high and hard-to-reach locations, which make them impossible for predators to reach. White storks are given free housing for life from their parents. Meanwhile, your asshole boomer parents demand you move out at 18 despite these absurd rent prices and hilariously used expression, well, the bird has to leave the nest at some point, as their justification. But now that you've seen how actual birds function, it's clear that they're not only totally delusional about the economy, they're totally delusional about nature as well, while they hilariously try to use it to defend their horrible parenting decisions. Now, before we wrap this all up, I'm going to quickly refute something that's bound to come up in the comments. Well, even if these animals don't have to work, someone still did. The shark still had to hunt for the remora fish, the stork's parents still had to build the nest, so they're still freeloading off of someone else's work, blah blah blah. The truth is, we are all freeloaders to society, and that's okay. This is a burden that society asked for and requested for, as they're literally asking people to have kids. It took 10,000 years of human sacrifice, labor, and ingenuity to get from the Stone Age to where we are today. You are mooching off the labor of others, whether you work or not. If you think that by working a comfortable desk job for 40 hours a week, you are somehow paying back all the 10,000 years of human technological progress that happened before you were even born, you are beyond arrogant and delusional. If you really want to prove you made it all by yourself, go out into a cave and invent everything from the wheel to cars to computers by yourself, without freeloading off the 10,000 years of human labor that happened before you were even born. So as you've seen, the idea that nothing is free and that everyone has to work as some universal law of nature is just flat out objectively wrong, even according to science and biology. Painting the animal kingdom with such broad strokes is a massive logical fallacy in the first place. And to be fair, there are just as many, if not more, examples of animals that do have to work really hard to earn a living. But this leads me to the biggest problem with the animal kingdom law of nature argument. Are we as human beings, the species that invented everything from cars to airplanes to artificial intelligence, really no better than the animal kingdom? Has the bar really fallen that low that we use savage animals to justify poverty and exploitation? Would it be crazy to suggest that maybe, just maybe, we hold ourselves to higher standards than literal animals? If clownfish figured out how to guarantee housing as a right, if remora fish figured out how to feed everyone, if a white stork understands that kicking your kids out in a horrible world isn't inspiring, it's stupid, is it really too much to ask that we, as human beings, do better than clownfish and white stork? Call me crazy, but I really don't think it should be. Beyond biological laws of nature, there is a very strong philosophical, moral reason we shouldn't be forced to work as well, and we examine this more in depth in this video right here. Check it out. I'll see you there. Thanks for watching.